when I started, to go back to your question, a really long time ago, I was looking more for a guru. I was looking for somebody who knew something mysterious that I wanted. And it didn't take very, very long in the martial arts to find out that that wasn't really what was in there.
Hi, this is the Social Jello with Angelo show. My name's Angelo. I'm a social scientist, surfer, martial artist, and a whole lot of other things. Coming to you live from Kasai City, Japan, the Social Jello with Angelo show.
What's up? Hey, new logo. Pretty cool, huh? Either way, thank you for checking out the Social Jello with Angelo podcast, SGWA podcast. As I mentioned earlier in the intro, my name's Angelo. I have a background in psychology, and I'm also a martial artist. Today, as part of the Kajukenbo series, I interview Grandmaster Barbara Bones. Pretty sure I said that right. I say it one more time during the podcast. She has awesome stories. She's been doing martial arts for a very long time, and she shares her philosophies, her history, transitioning from Taekwondo into Kajukenbo, how that worked. It's an awesome story. I really hope you stick around to hear the whole thing. I had a great time talking to her, and I hope you have a great time listening. All right, let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to SGWA podcast. As I introduced earlier before we started, I'm here with, I'm really bad with names. I'm going to shoot here because it looks like an easy one. Barbara Bones.
That's correct.
All right, cool.
Yes.
Aloha. Another thing I'm really bad at is remembering titles and ranks. I do know your Kajukenbo because we've come from the same family, so I know that. But would you mind sharing with my listeners your title and rank and all that stuff?
My Sifu, before he passed away this past year, promoted me to Grandmaster or Ninth Dan. And that's after, over 50 years of practice. And, many steps along the way. But I think he knew that there were four of us that had been with him for a really long time. And we're still with him. We actually all came up through the ranks together, and we all got promoted officially by Great Grandmaster Juarez, but through, Great Grandmaster Juarez promoted us at one of his events, but prior to that, Sifu had promoted me, as I call him Sifu. He was a Grandmaster also, but.
Yeah, I know how that is, right? If you've been doing this long enough, the people you train with now have different ranks and titles, and you always want to call them what you've always called them and known them as.
So I saw your podcast with Ron Stello, and at one point he said something like there are so many grandmasters at this point, and I was thinking about that, and I was actually shocked at the number of grandmasters there are, and I thought, like, what is going on? But now that I think of it, when we began training, Bruce Lee was alive. Kung Fu was on television a lot. We all, there was kind of a boom in the population for interest in the martial arts, and so I think a lot of those people just stayed. I don't think it'll stay that way where people stay decades and decades. Maybe, I don't know, but I think those numbers will probably not be as robust later on in this century. But yes, it's a good life to have our family of martial artists. It's important to everybody, I think.
Yeah, and it's just an awesome community. I mean, like I said, I've met a lot of different martial artists from different styles, and something that I've always loved about Kajukenbo was the fact that how I met John Hoylo, your last person who interviewed you. And for the listeners that are listening, definitely check out John Hoylo's deep dive through the KAA. I'll have a link somewhere around here. A little later, I'll edit a link probably up here somewhere. But I just love the fact that we've never met John, and the first time I met him in person, he invited me to his wedding. So that's just the kind of like that Ohana spirit that they always talk about, that aloha spirit is always there. But going back into your story here, so how did this all start? You said you've been doing martial arts for a long time. What got you into martial arts? What made you want to start punching and kicking people? Like, how did that happen?
I don't know, maybe I was well suited for it, because when I was in university, I used to hang out with this one fellow who was training in, I think, Taekwondo. And he was like, I know you'll love it. You should come to class. And the thing is, this fella, you know, I walked down the street with him. This is in Chicago. I'd walk down the street with him, and, you know, various shrubs and light posts and things would have techniques flying at them as we walked down the street. And when he told me that he thought I would like it, I thought it was like really wrong. Just that seemed impossible that I would ever enjoy that. But it turns out he was right. He was right. I did enjoy it. But when I finally came to that, I think what happened is a longtime friend of mine joined a class in Kajukenbo, and I liked the movement. I played sports growing up, and I liked the movement, and so I thought I would like to learn that. And then, rather than go with a Kajukenbo instructor, I went with a Taekwondo instructor. So I had a very good relationship with my teacher. It was all good. He had great technique. It was all good. But I think if you watch the other post, what happened was because my friend trained in Kajukenbo, I would go and watch through the windows, and I began memorizing the material. I would memorize forms and punching attacks and grab arts and things like that through the windows, and then I would run down the hall and practice and come back and get some more. And I realized that I had more passion for the movement that was Kajukenbo than Taekwondo. And essentially it's stylistic as my teacher taught it. But, you know, Taekwondo is very ballistic, I'll say. It's hard against hard. Be harder, be stronger, and you will win. And Kajukenbo had an element that was more suited to my size. I don't have a long reach. It had more slipping of blocks, more getting inside and taking away the leverage of longer, stronger people. And because of that, I was more drawn to it. And also, just sort of the beauty of the movement, of the dance, you might say, the grace, and I want to say hidden power. You know, you don't really realize how powerful a wave is until it hits you. It looks mellow. It just is rolling across the sea, and then it hits you and it flattens you and forces you down. And that's kind of the way I felt about the way my teacher taught. He was a very fluid mover. He was very deceptive and very powerful. And that was the attraction, I guess. And of course, we all, in those days, we all competed. He was a student at the University of Oregon. And so he led the martial arts club, and the University of Oregon would provide entrance fees to tournaments all over the place and travel money and stuff like that. And so even though I wasn't a student at the University of Oregon, I was done with my college. I would still somehow get to participate in that. And so I liked the sport because I had done sports. I like meeting different people of different styles. And so, yeah, it was just a big growth period. And we were all very, very, the group that we all got promoted together, this last promotion, we were there, 7 days a week. We were there all the time. And that might be, I noticed Ron said something similar, although his path was similar and he was younger. It seemed like, yeah, that's what you have to do. You have to build that foundation out of just hard work. Since moving to Hawaii, I've started playing Hawaiian steel guitar. And there's a famous Hawaiian steel player who has passed on. His name's Jerry Bird. And he said the same thing. There are no shortcuts. And if he's like, people aren't born with talent, they're born with the discipline to practice. And so that's what it was. And I loved the practice. It honestly didn't feel like it required any discipline. You know what I mean? It was just fun. It was challenging. It was always room for improvement. No matter where you are along the path, there's always room for improvement. So it keeps your mind awake. It keeps your self-awareness high. So that love for it is still there. Although, I'm in an older body now. I'm like 72 years old, and my joints and strength are not what they were when I was 22. So, it's an adjustment, actually. It's hard to give that up, but eventually we have to, I think, at least I have to.
Well, we all have to. I mean, I come from a background of, I almost became a professional fighter, and it wasn't something I intended to do. But yeah, there's always, like you said, there's always different stages of that journey, and there's always a point where something you can do. I mean, I'm not, I'm much younger, but still, even I'm 39, and there's definitely things that I'm not going to do as I approach 40. There's definitely things I'm dropping from that list, and professional fighting is one of them. But so my question, I want to go back real quick. You mentioned, how old were you? Because you said university. How old were you when you started practicing martial arts?
I was probably 21.
21. And when you made that, you said you played sports too. What sports were you playing?
Whatever I could play. Growing up, my dad coached our softball team. I was a pitcher in softball. I played basketball. I was too small to play basketball in today's world, but then, we played for fun more. And so I played basketball. I played tennis. I played whatever anybody would let me play, pretty much. And that was kind of all through my secondary school years. And then in college, I really didn't. In college, I was busy with life, I guess.
There we go. Sorry, I muted myself there. Do you feel that that sports background, that kind of athletic background, do you feel that helped you at all when you transitioned to martial arts?
Yeah, I think, if you're in your body, like some students come and they're not in their body. I'll tell you a short story about that. So when my Sifu moved to Colorado to practice with Al Dacascos, we all followed him. We all went too. We're like, okay, we're living in Colorado then, And so the Dacascos program had a program where you basically sell 5 private lessons and a couple group classes to stir people's interest so they would make a longer term contractual agreement with the school. And so this one woman came in, and she was absolutely not the kind of person you thought would train in the martial arts. She couldn't maintain eye contact with you. She constantly looked down. Her voice was very meek. Her posture was out of alignment. Her body was not strong, in appearance. And I drew the short straw one day, and I had to teach her one of the privates. And I was like, okay, what do I even do here? And our private rooms that we, had a mirror, but it also had a curtain that you could draw to cover the mirror. So I closed the curtain, and I'm like, I'm going to put your body in a position, and your only job is to not move. Like when I got you there, just don't move, just stay in it. And I went through, from the ground up, working on the stance, getting that posture correct, getting her spinal alignment correct, getting her shoulders relaxed, getting her head in a certain posture that looked forward rather than away. And it took the full half hour, actually. But in the end, I had it. I had sculpted her into a new awareness. And I'm like, do not move. And I pulled the curtain back. And she saw it. She saw herself in that moment as powerful. She could be formidable. She saw herself completely differently. And I'll tell you, she never went back. Like that lesson, that self-awareness, or that awareness of even potential, stuck with her. And she interacted in the group classes in a completely different way. I mean, it was profound. It wasn't my, my really amazing forethought that I could create that. It was more my curiosity. Could it be done? Could I find that in her? And I think that's one of the things about the art that I love is the transformation of all of us. We come with an idea of who we are, and along with that idea, with the ways in which we're limited. Either we're afraid, we're not strong, we're whatever it is, whatever story people tell themselves, they do build a box of limitations around themselves about their ability. And because the martial arts is such a long path, along the way, those barriers naturally begin to tumble. Or sometimes, you have to break your way through them. But being present when people transform is like the reason I stayed. Yes, my own personal transformation, but that was sort of assumed. But providing an environment in which people could shock themselves and leave their limitations behind and move forward. And that's why, people come in and they can't afford lessons because they can't keep a job and blah, blah, blah. And, after 2 or 3 years in the art and you've made accommodation for them, you've found a job for them in the school that they can do to, trade off, blah, blah, blah. And ultimately they get a job and they keep the job and they start teaching others, they start pulling other people along with them. Excuse me, I need water. And so I think, to me, that's what we offer. Getting a lozenge.
Oh yeah, no worries. I have my water. I have my bottle right here that I'm always going through. These talks, we get going and
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that transformation's amazing, right? Like you see that a lot. And I think I'm not gonna try to brag and say it's unique to Kajukenbo, but I will say that when I look at Kajukenbo and I look at for example, sports MMA, for example, right? And I've trained in both. I've always felt that Kajukenbo has this place where our perspective, our drive to train our students is to truly protect themselves, which is the same drive as the MMA people. They really want to teach them how to protect themselves in a very dangerous situation. But a little beyond that, we actually really care about how their lives are going. And a lot of times we will put our students before our own financial needs. And I'm not going to generalize broad stroke and say we all do this, but I've found this a lot. I found this in my instructor. He was constantly either doing scholarship programs. We lived in a rough neighborhood with gangs. So if we saw someone who was at risk to be in a gang and we noticed that their parents are working 4 jobs each and the kids got all this free time, we kind of take them in. Even if they couldn't afford the lessons, we'd say stuff. You can't afford a contract, just pay us $5 for the day. And if you can't afford that, go sweep the floor. Like I've heard a lot of these stories amongst Kajukenbo practitioners. And I'm not going to say it doesn't happen in MMA. I'm sure it does. But this is what really attracts me to the art. So looking at what you were talking about earlier, I kind of want to go back to that transition between Taekwondo and Kajukenbo. You already mentioned some of the points earlier with the movements, but and I know Taekwondo was different back then, but Taekwondo sparring compared to Kajukenbo sparring, what were some of the things that came up or that you noticed at that time?
Well, technically, Taekwondo likes long range. They like to stay out of range. Their defense isn't really that great if you're inside their range. I'm like disparaging a whole system that's worldwide, but
that's okay. That's okay. We're not throwing them under the bus. We're just saying, like, for what you noticed, you just, and again, for any Taekwondo listeners, we're just talking about observations between the rules of analysis. We really got to make sure we mention that Taekwondo has a certain set of rules that are set, especially now for sport fighting. They've always been kind of set that way. And Kajukenbo's got a different set of rules. So like going off of that, go ahead.
I think that
don't hold back.
For me, the attraction was inside fighting because honestly, if you're smaller and your reach is less, the safest place sometimes is right next to people. And I can remember situations where people would question the intelligence of going inside against really big people, like because they don't know how to bridge the gap, maybe. But once you figure that out and you can get in, it's a very safe place because like all of their leverage is and they have to adapt it to something short range, which they might not be comfortable doing. Whereas, a fully extended front thrust kick, they're don't get in front of that. I wouldn't want any part of that. So that was the main attraction, is the effectiveness of the angles that Kajukenbo takes, of the range that Kajukenbo takes, of the diversity of our attack in Kajukenbo. We're many times attacking tiny targets that maybe don't need, as much force to do damage or to gain advantage at least. And so all of those things suited my temperament very well. I mean, even if you looked at how I played basketball, I was never a great offensive player. Well, I was too small to be a great offensive player, actually. But I could play defense. I could steal the ball. I could thread passes into people in tight places. I could make myself useful with other things. And Kajukenbo sort of fit into that. In fact, the sparring is so much fun, and a lot of that fun is being able to read the other person, being able to manipulate the other person psychologically, have them, come into your little traps, have them believe things about your feints and fakes that of course are just tactics. But all of that I found to be incredibly fun. When I was in Taekwondo, we didn't practice that way. I only know that school that I was in, actually, but we practiced more force. If a full power kick came in, we used as much force as we could to deflect it, instead of in Kajukenbo basically not being there, just being absent from the place where they're kicking. I mean, there was just philosophically different and more the way I thought. And I want to say something else about the transformation thing, actually, or else I'll forget. So my Kajukenbo practice was in tandem with other practices in my life. Not all of them martial arts. I in the early 70s, I met a enlightened master of yoga and meditation, and I carry that practice with me to this day. I met Grandmaster Remy Praces. He was always called Professor when I was working out with him, but Professor Praces, and he was just a delight. I learned a million things from him. Still martial arts, very, very much a cousin of Kajukenbo in a way. But so many things about it are really, really similar. I practiced Tai Chi, and that was very different. But when you roll it all up in one person, all of the lessons cross and they enhance one another. They almost never contradict one another. And so all of that is enhancement. And going with that, I'll also say I had a career that was completely different from any of these things. And so that has different kinds of challenges about how to bring a team along, to embrace the same direction that you're going, to receive criticism in a positive way and adjust to take on challenging problems without fear, to accept failure when there is failure. All of those things, all of those messages cross. And so for me, the door into all of them was Kajukenbo. I mean, it was and is kind of like, my first family in a way.
And this actually really transitions to the next question that I wrote down here. What were you studying in college at the time? Because you said you went to the university. We never really touched on that. What were you studying back then?
I majored in psychology, but where I went to college, the University of Chicago, undergraduate work was sort of immaterial. That mostly it was preparation for graduate work, which I never did. But the University of Chicago isn't like a lot of universities in the sense that you study all original source study. Like if it's in the sciences, you go back to all the original sources. I never had a textbook in 4 years. I only had, if even my freshman year, like I was taking what was called astronomical and geophysical science. And we would go into the labs of the various professors who were doing research, and we'd stay there for 3 weeks and then go to another one and stay there for 3 weeks. And, it was very diverse, but the main thing the University of Chicago taught was how to analyze what's in front of you for the truth, actually.
So it was very research based then.
Well, in the sciences, I mean,
Yeah.
it has an amazing history in the sciences. So they were very strong. Like Enrico Fermi did his research there. So there was a lot of Nobel laureates on their faculty. But I didn't gravitate as much towards the literature or art or things like that. It was there. That was the same approach though. So it taught you basically how to think, how to solve a problem, how to weed out things that are extraneous to the problem and take only the things that are the most salient to the problem. It was a very good university. It probably still is. I don't know.
Sounds like a great
program. It was a good experience. I mean, I grew up in a small town, rural Oregon. So even just living in Chicago for 4 years was like a major change.
How was that? Right? Because if you sit and go in Chicago, that I can do a whole podcast just on the social analysis of crime and all kinds of stuff in Chicago, right? How was that?
Chicago, and I was there 66 to 70. So if you think about it, the 1968 Democratic Convention and the Chicago 7 and all the anti-war stuff, all the civil rights movement was going on in great numbers of people in the streets and stuff. So it was a very volatile time.
When I always forget, when were the race riots
in Chicago?
Yeah, when was that?
After Martin Luther King was killed, there were riots in Chicago. That must have been like 67 maybe ish.
So you were there?
Yeah.
Oh man. So oh man. So again, coming from a small town girl from Oregon, you go into Chicago, now you're in this environment. How was that?
It was all good. I mean, it's growing, it was all good. I mean, the university itself was more chill than what was going out beyond the realm of the university. The university had some cool things in it. It had there's a place called I think it's called the Oriental Museum, and it has all these relics from Egypt. It has like things that they probably stole out of the pyramids. I don't know where they got all that stuff, but it was cool. On your way to statistics class, you could pop in and look at some of the mummies and stuff. But it was all good. Everything about it was good. It wasn't. I mean, it had a lot of challenge because I can tell you in a small rural school growing up, you're never intellectually challenged as much as when you get to a university like that. A massive amount of reading all the time.
And so when you finished up you majored in psychology. Psychology. You know, I also majored in psychology, so you know, gotta give my props for that. But so you finished that. What career did you end up in? Like after you finished school, where did you end up going from there?
I came back to Oregon, and I thought I'd take some more classes. So that's why I was at the University of Oregon, where Sifu was. So things just sort of came together. And actually, when I met my meditation master, was when I was in Denver, and I was there because of the martial arts. But Muktananda came there, and so I met him there. So you know, it's that, you know how life goes. Sometimes you feel like someone's leading you through all of those connections. I don't know, it's mysterious, or maybe just you know, you gravitate to the areas that are going to take care of what you need to learn.
And how did you balance that? Like, so for example, I'm a martial artist and I also teach martial arts, and that's always been a part of my life. Well, not always, but for a long, long time, I'll say, since I was 12. Formal martial arts started when I was 18, 19. It was always there. But the career path for me, I've had lots of different careers in the time, and I've always found myself balancing my career with my martial arts ambitions. And also like right now, I live in Japan, and I'm a ESL teacher. I teach English as a second language. I run my own business doing that. How did you make that balance between what you want to do with martial arts, what you want to do with your life, and then what you want to do with your career? How did you kind of balance all that out for yourself?
I think early on, when I wanted to train 7 days a week, I lived on very little and found a way to practice all the time. By the time I came back from Colorado, I opened a school, and the process of opening the school and having it be commercial, I didn't love, actually. And so I want to make money a different way. I want the school to be there for people. I want to teach in the school. I want to see the growth and change in people, but I don't want to complicate that relationship with money. And so, you know, I do accept money for teaching seminars and things like that, but that has never been my financial way of life. So I started, even when I first came back from Colorado, after I opened the school, I joined a collective that sold natural foods, and I learned all kinds of things about business. I learned all of the accounting. I learned the process of staying in inventory, how you buy, how you keep things ahead of the game, how you don't get overstocked in some things. I learned about trucks, and I learned about loading pallets into trucks or other ways of loading trucks. I learned, you know what I mean? I learned a whole lot about operational things. And most of my career since then has had something to do with operations management. It was not always like that. I mean, I did retail operations management where I managed like 25 different stores. Not personally, but I had store managers in those places. But and I did administrative management where it was like HR and finance and IT and things like that. I did nonprofits. I did for-profits. I managed, I don't know if you've ever heard of this brand, 7 for All Mankind Jeans. I managed their distribution centers. Yeah, I worked in the pet industry, managing operations. Those stores were in the pet industry. So, you know, all of it are actually the same skills. It's just, they don't know. The people who are in the clothing industry think operations is completely different than the people in the pet food industry, but they're not. So that was fortunate for me because it gave me a lot of ability to have a comfortable living and not be stretching beyond my means.
So when you were sitting in there with these in these board meetings with these distribution head honchos, did any of them know that you were kicking ass on the side, or was that something you just kind of didn't talk about?
Not usually.
No. So they didn't know. They never found out. That was like a separate life.
Not usually. It was usually pretty separate. Although, in some phases, certain students needed jobs, and so I could help them find something in the organization that I was in. So they would know, but
that was about it. So like, when you were in that kind of environment, how do you feel martial arts change your perspective on how you view people? Like how you view people that don't do martial arts? Because there's a big difference. How did that influence you, if you don't mind sharing?
I'm not sure. I would say that those of us who teach have to be able to read what's in front of us. And we offer the information at a pace that it can be absorbed. And in that applies in terms of leading teams for sure. The other thing though is in the martial arts is you can kind of read BS when you're facing it. And so you see that in that environment. You can't really call it out in the same way you can when you're teaching the class. So you have to find a private meeting or some other way of getting that message across. But I think you'll relate to this, and probably all the teachers who are watching will relate to it, is that sometimes what you're saying is really simple and it's completely not heard on the other side of the communication. It's something like, keep your elbow in until you rotate the punch, so you can align all the way through the punch from start to finish as you have a technique. And I know several students who I said that in a million different ways, over and over and over and over again for years. And then I remember there was one student I had, and one day I came and made the correction for like the gazillionth time. And she said to me, "Oh, why didn't you ever tell me that?" And I just started laughing because, I had said it so many ways. But, I think that in business, you can't have that kind of patience sometimes. You can't accept that learning curve to last over years. So that's one of the challenging things about career. But I like the martial arts having the time to let that happen, rather than just holding them back. In my practice of music, I had a teacher one time at the very beginning when I first started to play music, and he told me, I want to learn this other song. I kept bringing him a different song to my privates, and he would take them and he would take them away, and they would never show up again. And I'm like, how come you never let me play those songs? And he said, well, you know how it is. You're a martial arts teacher. Until somebody gets something, you can't move to the next thing. And I'm like, well, that's not the kind of teacher I am at all. If someone walks in and we're working on an advanced form and it's their second class, they work on it with us. What to do? That there's no waiting. There's no waiting till they have mastered everything before you teach them the next thing. So, but there's probably a difference actually in Taekwondo and maybe Kaj generally, is that it was more orderly. And the other thing I'll say is like Taekwondo, Shotokan, others that are more rigid in their programs, you can meet someone in Japan who's practicing Shotokan, and then you can go to Chicago and go to a Shotokan class, and you'll be fine. You'll know everything they're doing in there, and they're doing it the same way. And there's not, and Kajukenbo, that's just not the case. But it's the forms are all slightly different, the tricks are all slightly different. And that's the fun of it for me. But I'll say they all have integrity. That's the thing, the integrity of the technique without the rigidity of the program around people. So yeah, I think that's an important part of what we teach, is to have that flexibility. And just from person to person, you know, those of us who stayed with Sifu all the way through till now, none of us move the same way as the other. That, you know, just if you even saw us do the same form, even the exact same dance, we would all be doing it differently. And I had two kids in my class, one of whom is one of the professors under me now. He stayed with it, his sister didn't. But to see them side by side, there came a point when they were like in their teens where he got strong and she kind of kept with what she was doing. She ultimately became a dancer, right? But he had gotten strong. And so his movement was more ballistic. It was more explosive. It was more that. And she had the soft movement perfected, and the grace between the moves, between the endpoints of the moves, her grace was profound. And you could see them do it side by side, and it was lovely to see, like both people, it was like a full expanse of the form to see them do it together. And so I think that's part of the beauty of our art, is there is permission to, there's almost the demand that you know yourself well enough to do it as you know, what I always think as a teacher is my job is to help a person become the greatest version of themselves that they can possibly be. And that.
All right. We had a small little network issue there, but we're back. And you were talking about that expression that we have in Kajukenbo, in our instructors, in the way we teach and the way students learn. Can you expand a little more on that?
Yeah, I can give you another example, I think. So my instructor, as I said, was very fluid and deceptive. And the power was more masked. It was kind of hidden until it hit you. And many of the people that are in the Gaylord side are kind of more hard Kempo style, like old style Kempo. And originally Kajukenbo was that. So it's not a surprise that it is that. So when I would bring my students to Great Grandmaster Gaylord's classes, you know, part of the room would be doing things that are more in the vein of that hard style. And me and all my students would be more in the vein of a softer expression of the same forms, of the same tricks, and so on. And what I found was Gaylord would go to the people who were doing it hard, and he would correct them on how to do it more effectively in the hard style. And he would come to us and he would correct us on how to more effectively use the softer style. You know, that whole expression was there for him, and not for all of us, actually. And from that, I took that we should never kind of give away any of it. That is, we should teach the whole art, that hard way and the softer expression. And some of the people in the room are going to gravitate towards one side or the other side, or a balance. But as much as possible as students, we should try to embrace all of it. And then when we have students, we have something to offer them based on their temperament, or their kind of their natural inclination, or their body, or their limitations, whatever it is. And I felt like Great Grandmaster Gaylord offered that to all of us. He didn't really make us wrong. He just gave us a way to be more right in whatever expression we had. And you know, as much as possible, I adopted that. And I'll say also, like one of my other teachers in Arnis, Professor Praises, he was like a genius teacher. Did you ever work with him?
I didn't get a chance to work with him, no.
Yeah. You know of him though, yeah.
Yeah. I've
Yeah.
heard, yeah. I've seen.
So people would come to his seminars who had no experience in the martial arts or anything else, and they were incredibly limited in their coordination and their ability to grasp what he was talking about. And he would call one of those people up in front of class who was doing the technique in a kind of way that I couldn't recognize as being good. And he would say, "Oh my God, you've got it." He would stop the class and he would put them in front of the class and he'd have them show it. And then he would praise them profusely. And I often worked with another martial arts friend of mine when we would go to seminars, and we would look at each other like, they have it? Because that isn't what I thought, And he would come to us and he would help us with where we were at. We're just in a different place. And what I noticed was a lot of those people, when he came back 6 months later, would come back to class again, and they would be much better. They believed in themselves. I mean, he gave them that. No matter what their technique was, he always gave them praise so that they would believe in themselves. And it was profound, because at that stage of my teaching, I was very much into refining to the nth degree details that would make it better, and not always saying how spectacular it already was. I would assume they knew that it was already spectacular, and that was really, really a failing of mine. And after I worked with him, I realized, just praise improvement. No matter how minuscule that improvement is, praise it, because it will reinforce it, and it will get better. And so, and that person that punched in a crazy way for years, had I found something right about it and focused on that early on, it probably would have come around a lot sooner. And so I think that's the beauty in having the role of teaching. Most of my teaching has been about self-awareness. I said it in the other post that I did, that we that's the biggest milestone. That's the biggest thing you can give someone, self-awareness, I think. And then the self will take care of everything else. If they're, you know what I mean? Like, the self becomes the teacher, let's hope, if the self-awareness is there. So, yeah, we hope for that. We do.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's funny, like, everybody goes to that. Everybody has that point in their teaching where they realize that, first of all, it's never perfect, and we're always trying to aim for that. But then we're teaching others, and we almost forget where we were when we started. And also people start at different points, right? I started at a very different point because of my totally bumbled that. Kinesthetic intelligence, right?
Yeah.
I've always been lucky enough that when someone showed me something, I didn't need a long explanation. I just needed to see it done once correctly, and then I could do a pretty close version of it. But as you know, not everyone learns the same. So like I'd always be watching, like when my instructor started having me guide line basics, I'd be sitting there watching the white belts throwing the reverse punch as a straight punch and correcting the punch because they're throwing the wrong punch, and he was correcting their legs, and the bow stance isn't low enough. And my instructor would sit there laughing at me. He's like, just let it go. Just show him once. Show him once. But if you're going to hold the whole class back with a white belt, all the rest of everyone else wants to get through line basics. Show them once and then move on. So like later, fast forward 15 years later, I'm coaching an MMA class, and one of my students is going over the intricacies of a triangle choke, and he's like, he doesn't have his leg right. And I'm watching the same. I'm like, this is like watching me. It's Anthony. It's okay. It's okay. His legs, as long as his legs are in the correct position, and he's somewhat got the head, and he's kind of choking you. It's okay if you can't complete the choke right now. Maybe that's not the goal. Maybe the goal is just to have him understand where his legs are gonna be for today.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, it's really amazing to see that.
I think though that we are very fortunate to have this in our experience. I had a student one time who was a child. I used to give all the child students to somebody else to teach because I'm not that good at teaching them, to be honest. But she was dyslexic, and so you would say, step forward with your right foot, and you had a 50-50 chance, right? Same thing, punch with the right hand, forward, back, left, right, up and down. It was like whatever her mind was doing with that information. On the other hand, she was really smart, but that didn't translate into any kind of control of the body. And finally, I invited her to test, knowing full well what I was going to see. It wasn't that far in, maybe like 6 months in. And the thing is she was really bright. And so she came to the test. Her parents are watching. And I had her go through her requirements. And she did them all. She stepped with the right foot. She punched with the right hand. She did the kicks on the correct side. She did it all perfectly. And in every test, I tried to not only show that perfection or that accomplishment, but also show the next step. Like what do you have to do next now that you can do that? So provide an obstacle for them to work on. And so I said, can you do it mirror image? So everything, sometimes we do that with our forms. We do mirror image forms just to work the other side because, our founders were dominant right-handers. It was interesting to train with Al, actually, because he's left-handed. And so a lot of his things were dominant left-handed. That was a good stretch. But so I asked her to do it on the opposite side. But at this time, she's maybe like 10 years old. And then I just saw her kind of like go inside. And then she did it. She did the mirror image of everything. Also correct. And I turned around and I looked at her parents. Her mother was just sobbing. Her dad took class with her and he was like stunned that it was even possible. And it's another one of those transformations that never turns back, because the next time they went to the parent-teacher conference, they're like, I don't know what you're doing with her, but whatever you're doing, you should keep doing it, because she's making amazing strides in not having the dyslexia anymore. And it wasn't me who did it. It was all her who did it. But I think like the grace of what we do when we teach is that we're present, we're witness to those things in the moments that they happen. And it's just so amazing, so gratifying.
Definitely being a witness to greatness and seeing people express their potential, right? As teachers, that's what we're always trying to push them, is to express their potential, which is really, it's an honor. It's something that when I got into it, I never thought I would. I don't know how it was for you, but I never thought I'd end up teaching. Like, I just wanted to learn how not to get beat up on the street. So it's to end up in a position where you start seeing people's potential. I think that's really that. We always talk about the mind, the body, and the spirit, and how that all kind of puts together in the Kajukenbo philosophy. And I think that's really an important. Right.
Well, I think, like, you've probably read a lot of advertisements for martial arts schools, and they make a lot of promises about self-confidence and strength and this and that. And it really only happens if that's what the teacher teaches. It really, the art, the techniques, to me are like apparatus, like gymnastic apparatus. So you can strengthen yourself on this apparatus. You can make yourself quicker on this apparatus. You can quiet your mind on this apparatus. You can do like amazing things by using this apparatus that we practice on all the time. And well, I think when I started, to go back to your question, a really long time ago, I was looking more for a guru. I was looking for somebody who knew something mysterious that I wanted. And it didn't take very long in the martial arts to find out that that wasn't really what was in there. That isn't what people were teaching. The meditation master, yes, but and so I think that, but the apparatus you can use for that, if that's what you focus on and that's what you teach, it can be used for any of those things, really almost anything. And the fact that it's self-defense is sort of like a pleasant side effect to me. It was never my first reason. Sport was more the reason. Just movement itself was the reason. I never really have had much occasion to call on it. It's not that I've had none, but I haven't had a lot. And most of what carried me in those moments was my lack of fear, right? So most people who attack women, the first thing they do is they test you to see if you're going to be afraid, because most people would rather have a cooperative victim than a victim who fights back. That's just true. And so when those tests come and you're aware of them and you don't show fear and you call them on it, it very often doesn't go anywhere. So you have no need to use anything other than your lack of fear. But yeah, knowing oneself, that is, to me, that's the art. Someplace Great Grandmaster Gaylord's like, Barbara, you gotta hit him. but maybe not. He told us he came to a class one time at Hand to Hand. One of my students has a school in Oakland called Hand to Hand, Kajukenbo, and he came and he was teaching stuff. And my student, who was the head teacher of the school, he had us do I can't remember, somebody attacked with a punch or a kick or a combination, and you deal with the combination and then you follow up. And she did the way I taught it, was more from the Costco side, which was just like relentless attack until they've succumbed. And so that's what she did. They were on the ground and she worked them over, and then she stepped back and she stood in set position and she's looking at him, and he just kind of has a funny look on his face, and he's like, Barbara, you do it, you show it. So the guy comes and he does the combination. I do a similar thing, I deal with it, and I take him down and I work him over on the ground, and I step back and I look at him, and he looks at the two of us, just starts laughing. He goes, you don't have to kill the guy. I just remember us looking at each other like, you don't? Oh, I don't know. We're a funny bunch. We are.
Yeah, no, I don't. I've said this before on the podcast, but yeah, my instructor, it's a very similar story. We were doing knife self-defense, and it was not coordinated. It was two or three attackers were going to come in, some with knives, some not, and they were really trying to get you. And I got the knife person down. The knife person came at me, I believe, second or third, and I took him down, took the knife out and stabbed him. And I felt I did a great job. I took him out, stabbed that guy. I think I stabbed another person because I had the knife at that point. And then when we were done, my instructor looks at me and says, "Congratulations, Angelo, you're a murderer." And I thought, oh wow.
It came so naturally.
I didn't think about that.
Well, I was in another class with Gaylord where he told us that if an assailant comes to your house and you beat them up or kill them, be sure you drag them back in the house if the fight's rolled outside, so you have a defense. But it's all good fun. It's all fantasy mostly, I hope.
Yeah. We hope. Yeah. So we're about to get to our wrap up here, but before we finish up, I usually typically ask the same question over and over again at the end, but I think today I want to ask you a different one considering your experience. A lot of people will do martial arts, and yeah, I'm going to say a lot. I'd say some, but a lot of people will do martial arts. They have that weird statistic, only 5 or 10% will actually get the black belt. and then only 1 or 2% will teach. And I'd like to say, even after teaching, only maybe 1% of that will keep doing it for the rest of their lives. So with you still training and still doing what you do, what's some words of wisdom for those who want to do this for the long haul? What's some advice you might give someone like me who's getting 40 and noticing that maybe full contact
I know, just
fighting?
showing up, honestly, it's so simple, right? It's just keep showing up. And the lessons will come. There'll be plateaus. There'll be times of boredom. There'll be obstacles, but just keep showing up. Many of us earlier in our training had training partners, friends, relatives who helped us show up. You're like, hey, I don't want to get to class. And they're like, you always feel happier after class. Why don't you come to class anyway? And I think I remember Gaylord one time saying, yeah, I quit once. Yeah, I quit martial arts once. And we're like, you did? He goes, yeah, but like 2 days later, I was back at it. And that hardly counts as quitting, but he felt like he quit, I guess. It's like, just keep showing up. Just keep doing it. I mean, that's the only thing I can say. There's no substitute for that. And it's its own reward. It's like, if you show up, you will be rewarded.
So there it is, folks. Just show up.
Just show up.
Just do it. Just do it. Just show up and do it. I'm not going to say just do it because I don't want Nike coming after me. But but you heard it here. Just show up and get it done.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories with me and taking the time to talk to me and share with my listeners your experiences. Really appreciate it.
I had a lot of fun, actually. Lots
of great stories here. I'm gonna re-listen. I don't re-listen very often because I don't like the sound of my own voice, but I'm gonna definitely re-listen to hear some of these stories because I loved them. Thank you again, and for my listeners, stay tuned for the wrap-up. And that's a wrap. I really appreciate you listening to the whole thing. This podcast grows organically. That means that if you share this with your friends and they share it with their friends, that's how I've gained all the subscriptions on my YouTube channel. If you're listening to this from iTunes or from TuneIn Radio, Last FM, or any of the many radio stations that broadcast it, please take a moment of your time, Google Social Jello with Angelo, and just hit subscribe on my YouTube channel. If you, for some reason, are still watching this and you didn't turn it off on YouTube, much appreciated. I know it's hard to watch a long format podcast on YouTube, so I really appreciate you doing that. Take the time, hit subscribe, much appreciated. If this is too much for you, totally, I understand. Listen to it from the internet through TuneIn Radio. That's how I listen to all my podcasts. You can still support the show by subscribing and then listen to it some other way. That's fine. That still helps me out a lot. I'm trying to shoot for 1,000 subscribers. Been trying to do that for a while now. I'm at 330, almost halfway. All right. Well, thanks again. And until next time, folks, as I always say, train your mind, body, and spirit every day. Catch you all later.